Good morning, VIPers, or as they say around here, Vipers. We'll wait and call you that when you come here. The message I'm sharing this morning has been requested. It's highly autobiographical and is not intended to sound unique, not in the least. Many professors and administrators on this campus have their own adventures and interesting experiences. I'm sharing mine with you this morning in connection with the importance of preparing your life to do God's will and to fulfill His calling. In July 1977, back in the dark ages for many of you, it was a hot July day, and I looked at my friend Dan Pawelski and I said, Dan, it's hot, let's go swimming. And he said, yes, let's go swimming. Although he said, I can't swim. I said, no problem, I'll teach you. 3 quick, easy lessons, 5 minutes, you'll be swimming. So we made our way down the road, and then we turned left, went back into a forest. There was a small stream, river, creek, whatever. My brothers had found this place that was kind of dug out. It was deep there, even though the rest of the stream wasn't so deep. There was a bank. We discovered that we could climb up on the bank and dive into the water. It was deep enough. We didn't break our necks. We enjoyed our summers going there. So I said, Dan, let's go there. He followed me. We went. My 2 sisters and his 1 sister, 3 of the girls, followed us. They didn't know how to swim either, but they thought they were going to watch us and watch Dan learn. When we got to our swimming hole, I just jumped in. Started to swim a bit when all of a sudden I heard a splash. And I looked, and Dan had jumped in. Now I thought that was a bit premature. And I thought he was going to let me teach him a little bit on the side there, the bank, just to go in easy. But all of a sudden he was in deep water. And he discovered that truly, he did not know how to swim. And I'm watching him thrash around in the water. I swam over to the edge, and he's bigger than me. And I'm thinking, I'd like to help you, Dan, but not right yet. Because I knew if I went to him, he would take both of us down. So I stood there just looking at him. He was making some noises. It almost sounded like an animal as he thrashed around. And then he disappeared, except for his black hair. It was on the surface of the water. His hands were still out at the wrists, and he was asking for help in a nonverbal way. My sisters were behind me and his sister, and they were screaming at me, go get him. But I was afraid to go get him. I'm 15 years old. I've always been kind of the runt of the litter in our family. And Dan was bigger than me, and now he had settled down. I could see that. And I knew that I just had a window of time to get to him. But I was still afraid. It's at times like that that logic sometimes strikes you in the wrong way. For instance, I thought, 1 dead is better than 2. That thought actually went through my mind. Well, I want to fast forward now 23 years to the year 2000. We'll let Dan rest there for a while in the water. The year was 2000. My family and I were at the Black Sea, actually a part of the Black Sea called the Azov, about the size of Lake Erie. It's kind of petitioned off from the larger Black Sea by the Crimea. You've heard of the Crimea in the news. The Russians took it from the Ukrainians a couple years ago. And we had gone there repeatedly in the past. A Russian pastor by the name of Peter and his family were there. He had 10 children. I think 7 of them were there that day. The wind was blowing. The sea looked different than it ever had to me before, and it looked a bit dangerous. The waves were high. And my wife looked at my son and said, be careful, that looks dangerous out there. My daughter went into the water it went down a little bit, then came up on kind of a shallow sandbar. And she was out there when all of a sudden the waves just swept her off the edge of the sandbar. And suddenly she was in over her head. She could swim, but barely. And she started struggling to get back. But the current underneath was so strong, it was impossible for her to get back. My oldest son went after her, and he could do nothing with her. I went in after both of them with really little hope of getting back because I could see what was happening. We were being washed down. When I got in the water, the current was pushing us down the edge of the peninsula, and once you get past the edge, you're 8 miles out to sea. Pastor Peter saw our plight. He jumped in. I was trying to do something with my daughter. My son was. Neither of us could do anything. Soon the waves were so pouring over our head, we were just all fighting for our own life as we got swept down the coast. When Peter got out there, it wasn't long till he was underwater. I heard him saying, "Oh, my heart," behind me, and then he disappeared. My wife went running down the shore, the beach there, screaming for help, only she was speaking English, and people talk Russian there. Well, both of those situations that happened 23 years apart were solved because of the word that I want to talk to you today about, the word preparation. I'm here today because somebody was prepared. Dan Pawelski lived because somebody was prepared. He went on to become a Dayton, Ohio police officer for some 20, 25 years and is now retired from that job. Obviously, you know I lived through both experiences, or I wouldn't be here. Just thought you should know that. In 1992, I'll get back to those stories after a while, maybe. In 1992, I was traveling down a Ukrainian highway with a Ukrainian pastor. He and I were doing evangelism together in southeast Ukraine in many different contexts. That morning, he told me that I would need to preach the gospel at a military camp with 300 soldiers several miles away. As we were driving to that appointment, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, by the way, tomorrow you'll be speaking in a public school to public school teachers on the subject of Christian ethics and how they can teach those ethics to their students." Earlier in the day, I'd already spoken at a funeral in a village. In that case, I'd been given about 15 minutes advance warning. Inside, I was fuming a little bit. "Peter, why can't you tell me this stuff a little bit more in advance? I would like to know a day or two before speaking to 300 soldiers at a military camp or 50 public school teachers." I never said anything to him. I remembered what a college professor had told me. "Students," he would say, "in Christian ministry, you have to stay ready to what? Preach, pray, sing, or die at a moment's notice." That summer of 1992, his words proved to be prophetic in my life. At a moment's notice, I did in fact preach, pray, sing, and when I drove around with Pastor Peter, I thought I would die. His little jalopy and his terrible driving skills, I had to be ready to die at a moment's notice. In Russia and Ukraine, back in the 90s at least, you would be riding around in what I call a washing machine on wheels. The windshield would be shattered. The driver's seat was propped up by a tire pump. I'd look in the back seat. My wife was crying. Why? We had just passed a string of cars with ongoing traffic, and right at the last minute before we died, the car coming would go to the right a little bit. The cars we were passing would go to their right a little bit, left, the oncoming traffic, and we would do a quarterback sneak up the middle. I would turn and look at my wife, and she would be crying, and I understood why. She thought we were going to go back across the Atlantic in body bags. You know, God had ordained that summer that we would preach, pray, and sing, but the dying, he said, would come later. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20 and 21, Paul wrote, "In a great house there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and earth, some to honor, some to dishonor. If a man will purge himself of these dishonorable elements," you get sin and bad habits out of your life, He'll be a vessel of honor, sanctified and meet for the master's use. Now listen to this. Prepared for every good work. This text reminds us that there is good work to be done. I want to remind you that God has a good work for your life, for you. And there's every kind of good work, and you have no idea what you're in for and what God will call on you to do. And then he said there's preparation for every good kind of work. And that's what I want to talk to you this morning about. I want to talk to you about the various kinds of work I've been involved in, but the kind of preparation that we're endeavoring to provide right here at God's Bible School to get you ready for every kind of good work. When I became a Christian at 15 years of age, I had no idea when I answered the call that God had on my life what it would lead to. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I had no idea. Since that day, I've been asked and expected to do all kinds of different things. My situation, again, is not unique. Professors, administrators, people here have similar stories. But let me go through a litany of those things. Things I've been expected to do in ministry. Preach, of course. I've preached in camps, churches, revivals, at youth camps, on the street, in hospitals, at baptismal services, public schools, banquets, military camps. I didn't know that I would be called on to preach at the funeral of saints and sinners, suicides, babies, teenagers, middle-aged and senior citizens. I understood that I would be called on to be a pastor, and I was for 30-some years. But I didn't comprehend the variety of churches I would be called to serve and how different people would be in different contexts. I didn't know that someday God would direct me into the field of teaching in a grade school, a high school, a state university, or teaching pastors in churches in foreign countries, or in Bible colleges here at home, with GBS, of course, being the best one. I did not know that I would be involved in missionary work or writing or counseling. Counseling. With so many problems of my own. Whether I like it or not, I've had to counsel people with marriage problems, relational problems, church problems, sexual problems, homosexuals, adultery, courtship, and dating problems. Wow, a lot of that around here. Children and parent problems, educational, financial, psychological, spiritual, and physical problems. I've counseled schizophrenics and alcoholics. I know, where's Richard Miles? This sounds scary when I don't have a degree or know what I'm doing. I will never forget the day when a woman walked up to me at a mental institution and said to me, "Hi, I'm Jesus." She really needed counseling, but I had no idea what to say to her other than wrong gender and wrong century, lady. Sometimes when counseling, I feel like Anthony Campolo, who said that he was a terrible counselor. He says after 20 minutes of listening, he finds himself screaming, "You know, you really are a pervert." I did not know that I would be involved in prison work, in 6 prisons in 3 states, preaching, counseling, singing, and leading Bible studies, or in social work. That's right, I've helped people to get jobs, GEDs, disability payments, make restitutions. I've even given haircuts to new converts without a barbering license. I didn't know I'd be involved in raising finances for church buildings, church planners, evangelists, vehicles, airline tickets, Christian literature, mission overhead, humanitarian assistance, and medical needs. I didn't know about the debates, arguments, and discussions I would have with atheists, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Orthodox, Catholic, Muslim, Hindus, and Buddhists. I didn't know I'd have the opportunity to witness on airplanes, on the street, in hospitals, jails, universities, and homes. I didn't imagine getting to tour guide in Amish country, New York City, and Israel. Oh, Israel. What can I say about Israel? I told my wife the other day I have 2 loves in my life, her and Israel. She gets 51%, Israel gets 49%. She wasn't impressed. I didn't know I'd get to travel extensively. You know, I thought before my conversion at 15 that if I served God, my life would be boring, uneventful, probably would never get out of my county. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I've gotten to travel extensively in and through Canada, Mexico, Guatemala, Hong Kong, China, South Korea, Taiwan, Germany, Spain, England, Ireland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Switzerland, Austria, Russia, Ukraine, the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, and Israel. Many times. I've driven across Europe several times without speaking one of the languages of the country that I drove through. If you do that, you better like maps or GPS or something. Map skills were helpful. I did not know that I would be called on to answer so many questions. When I was in my 20s, I was studying the Bible, theology, homiletics, philosophy, history, science, English, and on and on. I used to get depressed and think, and I'd say to my wife, what am I studying all this for? I'll probably never get a chance to use it. Then in 1992, I went to Ukraine for the summer to do ministry with my family. I wrote down 93 questions I was asked in just that first summer from people in all kinds of contexts, most of them public settings, but also in private, in churches, houses of culture, street meetings, and so forth. I'm going to read you that list, all right, very quickly. The Bible talks about being prepared to give an answer. Some of these answers weren't hard to give. I was asked about mixed bathing, UFOs, TV, tongues, hair, rock and roll, Christian films, cosmetics, jewelry, the head covering, Satan worship, Christians eating meat, Sabbath worship, and is George Bush a Christian? Church services in America, cooking food on the full moon. And I don't know, but I cook food all the time. Can a Christian be a policeman, carry a gun, go to war? What does this verse mean? There are many religions. How do we know which one is right? What about extrasensory perception? My husband doesn't want me to go to church. What should I do about it? What's the difference between religious groups in the U.S.? Am I rich or poor by American standards? A Russian evangelist asked me that question. I knew he wasn't poor by American standards, or rich. I didn't want to tell him. So I said, how many children do you have? He said, 10. I said, the Bible says, you know, when your quiver is filled up with children, that you're a rich man. I said, by that standard, you're very rich. American Caucasian women have 1.2 children. I don't know where they get the 0.2, but they do. And I said, by their standards, by our standards, you're very rich. Do you have a car? How many? How many rooms does your house have? Why does the Bible say Christians do not sin? Then it says in James 3 that in many things we all offend. Should a church be registered or unregistered? Is God or Satan more powerful? Should we pray with candles and by crossing ourselves? Are charismatics right? What about the Orthodox? Should Christians drink alcohol? What's the sin unto death? What's the difference between prophecy in the Old Testament, prophecy in the New Testament? What about birth control? And would you take these documents to George Bush? I had explained that I'm working on my in to the White House. Don't have it yet, but I'll soon, I'm sure, have it. How many bathrooms does your house have? What do you think about the standard of living in Ukraine? Do you like our food? What do Americans think about us? I don't know, there's 300 million of them. Who do you think will win the American election? How much did your guitar cost? Your car cost? Does your church have a choir? Is the devil the same in America as he is in Ukraine? Do you visit prisons at home? What education do you have? How many languages do you know? Would you like to move here? Do you believe in spanking children? Not enough. Will you sing again? How many times have you been to Ukraine? How old are you? What clothes do you wear when you preach? How many states have you been in? Will you come back to our church? What do you think about abortion? Do you have a computer? Do you think our crops are good or bad? What are the Christian holidays in America? What do you think of Gorbachev and Yeltsin? Why do you think Ukraine and Russia are having a revival? What do Americans think about doctors? How much does bread cost? What's the future of the people here who have not repented? Is the body of Jesus in Italy? Not the last I checked. When did your interpreter learn Russian? Why do Christians sacrifice their children? I have 6. I've only sacrificed 3. I don't know why I haven't the others. If I get married, will I find myself, my second half, and be closer to God? Do Christians marry Christians just because they're Christians or because they love a person? What about vibrations from outer space? Do you know that people talk with plants and animals? Can you find more Christian literature for us? Don't you feel called to be a missionary in Ukraine? We were taught that Americans were dumb and unemployed. What were you taught about us? Can you give me some money? Would you mail these letters? Does the Bible teach about the quantity of children? Do your children always listen to you? Do you spank your children? Why do Americans wear hose and socks? I have no idea. How much is a seatbelt fine in America? $1,000? What's the national American food? What do you drink in America? Do you believe in healing? How old were you when you repented? When you became a pastor? When will Jesus come back? I was supposed to know everything. Will the world end in the year 2000? Is your wife only a Christian because of your influence? Will you help us buy a piano? What are weddings like in America? What do you want to wish to the citizens of our city? Will you take part in this wedding, in this church dedication, in this funeral? And last of all, but not least, should I beat my wife? That depends. If you want to go to prison. All right? Not if she's bad. So, everything I'd ever studied helped me in that context. I didn't know enough, believe me. I've never known too much, and neither will you. But we have to get prepared if we're going to be a blessing to the world. If we're just going to answer questions, much less be able to truly invest in the lives of others. Your preparation will involve several things. First and foremost, it needs to be spiritual preparation that you're giving yourself to. Young people, you can get smart all you want, but if you're not deep in your spiritual walk with God, your work's always going to be shallow. Spiritual preparation, the cultivation of your spiritual life through spiritual disciplines like prayer, scriptural meditation, memorization, fasting, solitude, silence. These are things you need to cultivate, and we want to help you cultivate them in this college. Domestic preparation. Who will you marry? How you'll protect your marriage from sexual immorality. How you'll raise your children. Character preparation. Learning to work. It's amazing how you can succeed if you learn to work and work hard. Learn to stick at something until you're finished. Some things, it doesn't really matter maybe, but what matters is that you learn to carry through and you just stick at stuff. Now, some things need to be changed. I'm not asking you to stick, or no one should ask you to stick at something that is fruitless. But you know, sometimes you get the idea it's fruitless when it's not. And you need the character to learn to persevere. Physical preparation, eating right, exercise, rest, relaxation, sleeping enough but not too much. I read the other day that if you sleep under 5 hours, it hurts your health. If you sleep more than 8 or 9, it hurts your health. Getting the balance in life, living holistically. Intellectual preparation, knowing the Bible, theology, apologetics, Christian philosophies and worldview, world religions, the English language. Somebody asked Rush Limbaugh, that bastion of deep wisdom. Some years ago, Rush, how can I be successful at something? He said, learn to speak and write well the English language. That's where it should start for you, he said. Yeah. Psychology, sociology, learn music, learn to play an instrument, world geography, history, church and mission history, learn how to teach, preach, sing, minister to children, conduct interviews, tour guide, publish, use the computer, explain your ideas clearly, learn how to handle money responsibly. This is all preparation for life. General preparation, reading, good books, newspapers, journals, observation. You learn a lot by just observing people. If you don't want to make the same dumb mistake, see how it plays out for them. And then don't repeat it. Learning to get along with people, interpersonal skills, skills of every kind. Travel. Take opportunities to travel. You'll learn. You say, what are the rewards of preparing to fulfill your calling? And even if you choose to do it here at GBS, there will be rewards, huge rewards. I can't imagine my life without having chosen to serve God and then chosen to prepare to serve Him in various contexts. You talk about a life of excitement and adventure. You talk about an escape from boredom. If you want to land in the middle of problems, do your own thing. If you want to live a life where you'll be bored silly, follow your plans. If you want a life of excitement and adventure, then follow God's plans for your life. Boredom is actually the sign that maybe you're not where you're supposed to be. It can be. It's exciting, you see, it has been for me to ride around in little foreign cars, avoiding oncoming cars by inches. Peter let me know that if you miss by 2 inches, you might as well miss by 2 miles. It's all the same. Being interrogated by police with machine guns, having a drunk policeman bear hug me one rainy, dark night because I stopped and helped him along the road. It was the other, it's supposed to be the other way around. I was pulling his vehicle with my car, and when I was undoing my little rope down there, my bumper, I felt this huge bear hug, and I thought, this guy's not a policeman, he's a criminal. And I'm going to be found in a ditch, a Ukrainian ditch. But he was slobbering over me, thanking me for helping him. That's an exciting life. It's exciting to walk home in the dark in a faraway city and not know who's going to put a knife in you, or nearly drowning in the Black Sea. But to serve God, you'll take a risk, and that risk will often be exciting. You want extreme? This is the place to be extreme. Secondly, you'll forge lasting friendships. Friendships that'll last for a lifetime in Bible college and in the work of God. There are going to be people that are walking the same path with you, preparing their life to fulfill God's calling. And those friendships will last a lifetime, many of them. You'll experience a life of miracles and answers to prayer. I'll never forget, in 1993, Pastor Peter and I at a church, after we were done, he brought a woman up front. Said she has cancer, she's supposed to have surgery in a few days for it. But she wants to repent of her sins, and she wants us to pray over her. She knelt down right there, repented of her sins. Then we prayed over her, asked God to forgive her, give her new life in Him, and then she wanted us to pray for her physical condition. I don't know why God sometimes heals people and sometimes He lets them die. Ultimately lets all of us die. But that day, God had different plans for her. We prayed over her. She went to the hospital. 3 days later, they cut her open and couldn't find what they were cutting her open to take out. They sewed her back up. The last I knew, she had moved to Russia from Ukraine and was doing fine. Those are exciting times. A life of miracles, answers to prayer. I'll never forget many of these. And then, if you'll prepare yourself, you'll find out that God will make a very real difference in the lives of others if you'll prepare yourself. Spiritually, academically, vocationally, you'll take your opportunities, not throw them away, but deepen your life. God will broaden it. And He'll make you a blessing and make a very real difference in the lives of no doubt hundreds of people over decades of time. Just last week, I got a letter, actually a Facebook message from the sister of the governor of Kentucky. Her name's Mary. She was one of my first students here at this college, 2001 to 2003. She'd come from New Hampshire, but her brother lived in Louisville, and just last fall, he was elected governor of Kentucky. Her letter talked about the huge difference that GBS had made in her life. She was in the middle of a crisis in 2001 when I came here. This was her second year here. We spent a lot of time that year together, and she interacted with a lot of people on this campus that brought tremendous help. It wasn't just in the classroom, but it was the environment here. It was the people that took time to talk to her and invest in her. And that's what we've got here. We've got scores of people that love young people, that love to pray and talk with them, that love to take walks with you or sit and drink coffee somewhere. And their influence on your life will make a huge difference. And you'll go from the halls of this place to make a huge difference in the lives of others. There's an old man by the sea throwing little sea creatures back in the water. Thousands of them had washed up on the shore. And he's just out there slowly working, picking up one sea creature at a time and throwing it back in the water. And somebody came by and said, "Old man, what difference do you think you're making? There are thousands of these here. He said, I don't know in the big picture, but I know for every one of these sea creatures I throw back in, they live because of what I'm doing. God's not asking you to save the world, but He is asking you to change one life at a time. And if you'll prepare your life, God will use you to do it. One life at a time. If you're going to be a world changer, if you're going to make a difference in the lives of others, I can tell you, you won't do it by accident. It'll be intentional. So get yourself prepared to do it. How about that? And I'll see you in August.
Let's say a word of prayer together.